child brides have high levels of HIV and death during childbirth. As Tanya Page now reports from Chibombo, cultural traditions and poverty play a big part.
This is the sound of opportunity for these women. A mill to grind maize means they can earn a living. Lucina Moinga and Melina Mundengele were married as teenagers. Lucina when she was just 15.
I had no choice because my parents couldn't afford to take us to school. I was just at home doing nothing. I didn't want to get married, but there was no money for school.
Although primary school is free in Zambia, secondary school isn't. Widespread poverty means many parents can't afford to pay the school fees, so they marry their daughters off. Lucina and Melina's village is a bit different. An organisation called Plan is teaching them about girl power. Its mill offers an income and a place to teach them about their rights, although that's caused some issues.
There are some problems. The children have learned about their rights, and sometimes the demands upon their parents are impossible to meet. When the parents are pushed against the wall, the message isn't work.
Child brides are more likely to be in abusive relationships, contract HIV and to die during childbirth.
Having communities like this buy into the idea of ending child marriage is the first step to stopping it, but the practicalities are far more complex and go way beyond this community's culture, its history and traditions, or even the village borders.
The first African Girls Summit on ending child marriage is being held in Zambia. It wants to influence governments across Africa. Some attitudes are swinging towards girl power.
It means girls coming together with energy, not the old ladies, just us, because we have the power to change our lives as girls.
She's trying to take control of her life by breaking the cycle of poverty so her daughter can stay in school, creating a new tradition for her young family.
And Tanya joins us live from the Zambian capital, Lusaka. Tanya, it must be incredibly difficult to get the message, the central message, to the people who need to hear it.
Oh, absolutely. And part of the problem is, of course, that message needs to get to everyone, from the girls in the villages, like the one you just saw in my story, all the way up to the top and the governments across Africa and, of course, across the world, because this isn't just an African problem. But with me to talk a little bit more about that and how you do that is the Regional Director for Plan International, Roland Angora. We've seen some of the grassroots efforts you're doing in the villages, like in that story there, but how do you get governments to really effect change and curb child marriage?
Yeah, first of all, it's good to see that the political consensus is emerging in this conference, but we're convinced the consensus alone is not enough. The governments have to take action, probably two fields. One is they have to adjust their legal systems, and number two, they have to put the resources where the consensus is. Let me talk a bit about the legal systems. In Plan, we're working with the Southern African Development Community to establish a model law. And I'm happy to say that Malawi has approved a law against child marriages recently. And that includes things like response mechanisms and complaints mechanisms. We also work with the African Union on the campaign to end child marriage. We work with the expert committee on the rights of the child to actually ensure that the African Children's Charter is domesticated in all the countries. So,
one of the issues talked about here is the need for birth registration. Why is that important?
Birth registration is a key element if we want to curb child marriage, because if you don't know how old the children are, how can we actually say that this is a child marriage going on? And birth registration is a huge gap in Africa, and it will require a huge amount of resources to actually fill that gap. And we're here to work through the African Development Bank on digital systems to actually ensure that governments are capable of registering all the children and all the marriages that are taking place.
One comment that came out at the summit was that we shouldn't be talking about child marriage, we should be talking about child abuse and child rape.
Well, I would agree in terms of the terminology, but again, the legal system is against that. We have to make sure that this is written into the law, that the age of consent is established, and that it is clearly defined what child marriage means versus child abuse, rape, or violations. If that is not in the law, then it is hard to take any handle or to take any actions against perpetrators.
Roland Angara, thank you very much for your point of view here. That is the Regional Director for Plan International, one of the many organisations doing its best to curb the scourge of child marriage here in Africa.
Tanya, thank you.